I talked to you very briefly a couple days ago, and you had mentioned that you were in the middle of a ceremony cycle or something like that because it's your how can we say it? Your Mayan birthday. It was 5 each, right?
Yeah, Awachkik, your face of the sun.
Okay,
that's what it's called.
Awachkik.
And Awachkik, yeah.
Uh-huh.
So this is kind of like there are 260 faces of the sun, 260 different energies. And, it's kind of like, some people will say, well, how can you only have 260 kind of different personalities, as it were? There's got to be a lot more nuances to it than that. But really, you've got to take into account the year lord as well.
Right.
And then that will give you something like, it'll give you about 13,000 something or other different combinations in that. Those two things are the most important, right? So every 260 days we're going through a cycle of rebirth. We're going through a cycle of conception and rebirth. And so I've just gone through my rebirth on Saturday past. So I've been making ceremonies, and I've been making my public ceremonies. We had a public ceremony for Washington Marc yesterday. I made a ceremony for Wukubach Marc on Monday, because that's part of my extended cross, or my constellation as it's called. So it's a busy time right now. There's a lot of candles being burned.
So how do you approach your face of the sun? Like what's let's say, there's 9 signs in your cross or whatever, and it's the birthday season for Marc. What's the first thing you do? How do you approach it? Let's say the first day of the whole cross.
Okay, Paul, I've lost you slightly there.
Yeah, me too.
But
can you hear me, Marc?
Yeah, I can hear you perfectly, Eagle.
Did you say that your birthday is 5 Balamish?
Yes,
right.
It is. Yeah. So the way that I approach it, I mean, what we're looking at, this is the best way that I can put it, I think, because it feels right to me right now, but this is the description for right now. So there is a way that, if a woman wants to measure when is going to be the best time for her to conceive, she'll check her temperature each day, and then she can work out exactly when she's going to ovulate, exactly when her most fertile time to conceive, to create is, right? Mm-hmm. And this is what this calendar does in one way or another. Only what we're talking about is the conception and rebirth of ourselves within the evolution of our souls within this body. Mm-hmm. So as we go through, we're watching effectively our, how can we put it, like our energetic temperature change. And we're looking for this point of creation. So, people will do things like they'll do new moon manifestations, for example. New moon's a great time to be writing out what you want to come in over the next 28 days. Take responsibility for your creativity in this world as your part within creation of this world, as the part that you play within, the theatre that we're all in, But what we have with the Jok-Ik is that this is tracking exactly our own personal cycle of evolution. And so it's a bit like saying, on your day of Awachki, and also on the day of what we would call your conception, 8 days before, these are the 2 important days, because you've got conception day and then you've got birthday. So on conception day, you're conceiving, you're planting what you want to bring in over the next 10 days, over the next 260 days rather. For me, that's 10 Kamei, Lahuk Kamei. And then on my own birthday, that's when I'm bringing forth what it is I've been sitting on, what I've been gestating. I'm also kind of like, I've been, the last few days have been very intense. I've been brainstorming with a friend over a whole bunch of ideas with Venus and cycles and all sorts of things. And what we really got back to is like, when we're making these fires, because, in the last 5 days, I've had 3 ceremonies, and the ceremonies are like 3-4 hour ceremonies. So it's been a lot of time doing that kind of thing. And what we're doing is we're giving thanks for what we've received. We're asking for pardon, because we're only human. We're put here to be human. We're put here to kind of fall over and get back up again, and like recognize it and say, hey, sorry about that. I'll try and do better next time at that. We're here to ask. Because this is a thing, I don't know whether it's been drummed into us, and we have to keep this sense of humility at all times. This is really important, but it doesn't mean that we can't ask for what we need or want in the world. If we think that something's going to benefit us, particularly if we think something's going to benefit our evolution, let's ask for it. Ask for some help. That's what these fires are about. That's what prayer's about. That's what ceremony is about. Ask for what you need. And so when we have this point in time where we complete one cycle, where we're rebirthing ourselves and where we're conceiving what it is that we want to gestate over the next 9 months or so, ask. Make our offerings, make our candles, make our prayers, and ask for what we need to come in. This is the key to it. So this is what we've been doing a lot of over the last few days. Like I say, tying a few things up as well, of saying kind of like, okay, in the last 260 days, where could I have done better? Where did I kind of really fall over? What experiences would I choose not to necessarily have to repeat in my life, And where do I want to take it in the future? So it gives us a set point in time where we can really focus our attention, and the energy is flowing in the correct direction to allow us to manifest that into our world. So this is really kind of like what that turn of the cycle is all about.
That is a very poetic and beautiful summarization of the whole thing. You did a stellar job there.
Thank you.
Eagle, you got something to say on that?
I mean, it's evident to me that all this process is very much alive within you now, because you're very fresh, out of doing these ceremonies and the cycle. And I was wondering, it's 3-4 hour ceremonies. What do you usually do? What do you typically do during the ceremony, and how does it relate to you personally? I mean, do you do it with other people, or do you do it with just by yourself?
Good question.
It all depends. For me, like, there is a certain thing as an aqir that you're always making your ceremony for other people, whether there's people there or not. You're making ceremony to bring harmony, to bring prosperity to your community. That's what we do. We are balancers. We are there to make petitions on behalf of our community, on behalf of our family, to keep our physical world in balance, to make sure that the altars are fed, to make sure that the essences, the spirits of the days are remembered and fed. That's what it's all about. Okay? So this is the prime part of it. So it doesn't matter whether people turn up or not. I'm going to be down at my altar, down by the lake, making my ceremony. That's the important bit. Now, yesterday, my ceremony for Washikib Noch, we had 13 of us there. That was a big ceremony. On my ceremony on Hukubach Marc on Monday, we were 3. And we went up to a different altar. We went up to an altar behind my house called Shepot Drell, which you sometimes see on my website. There's a few pictures of me working in the cave up there. And we made our forgiveness ceremony up there.
Yeah.
Guys, I don't know, there's a lot of clicking going on someone's mic.
No, man, that's me. I'm sorry. I'm walking into the forest right now, and there's always wild boars. There's wild boars around here, and it's dark. It's the middle of the night, and they scare the crap out of me. And so I always like to stomp my feet because I don't want to get attacked by a wild boar.
Okay.
But it's
all right. Just so you know.
Let me just get past the safe zone. I'm just sometimes I come up here and I'll hear like, and it just scares the hell out of me. So.
Yeah, sure.
Yeah, it's just wild animals, man.
Okay.
Anyways, I'm sorry. Continue.
So,
I'll try to walk quietly.
So on Saturday it was just me, because Saturday really for me was very much my own personal ceremony. This was like my personal invocation and this sort of thing. And just because of circumstance, I've actually missed my own birthday. The last 2 cycles I've missed my own birthday, and I realized just how important it is. It's like if you're in a ship and you don't bother setting the heading, who knows where you're going to end up.
Yeah.
This is what I mean about taking responsibility for our own creative potential and taking responsibility for our own evolutionary path. So like I say, all depends on the day. I don't tend to put my ceremonies out there as a kind of like flyer the heck out of the place and invite all and sundry. It's the people that know me that say, hey, you're going to do a ceremony? And I'm like, yeah, okay, come along, 9 o'clock and we'll make a ceremony. So the ceremony starts when people arrive. The ceremony starts. We're dividing up the flowers. We're taking the petals off the flowers. We're making like confetti from flower petals, as it were. And I think you've probably both seen on my site the pictures of the ceremonies, how we decorate the altar with flower petals and that. And I'm sitting there and I'm dividing up the offerings. Now, sometimes I'm on my own, and sometimes I have like a guest come along, or a guest chef, as I like to see them, who's going to come and add their spice, who's going to come and add their herbs, their recipe to the pot, because we're feeding the Nahuales, we're feeding the essences of the days through the ceremony. And so I've just been lucky. I've had a guest staying with me for the last couple of days, and he's been helping out to add his medicine to the pot, which has been really amazing. Yet, as I said, yesterday we had 13 people. So what are we going to do? Well, it all depends on the day as to how the ceremony is going to proceed. First of all, we're going to separate up the offerings, and I'm going to make little like piles of candles, sugar, incense, all of these offerings that we're going to put onto the fire. And I'm going to give each person a bundle of candles, because those candles are going to carry their intentions. So they're going to hold these candles through the invocation of the 260 days. And we have different colors of candles. So we have red for strength, we have white for purity, we have black for wisdom, we have yellow for healing, we have green for the materials that come from the heart of the earth, we have blue for the inspiration that comes from the heart of the sky, and then we have the sabo candles, the candles which are made from often beef fat, from tallow, and that's what we use to give thanks to the ancestors. So they carry these 7 candles in their hand throughout the ceremony. And as we call each other Nahuales, then, you might think, okay, Kek, so that's about strength, and that's about messages from nature and this sort of thing. It's like, right, okay, I'd like to get a message from nature to inspire me. So the blue candle or the green candle might carry that message back to the fire when we put them in at the end. So we have that kind of aspect of it. We invoke the grandparents of the 4 directions. Balam Kitse, Kahapaluna, Balam Ab Chomika, Mahukuta Zononiya, Balamikim Kakishaha. The 4 first couples, the grandparents of us all, we invoke them and we ask them to come and bring their strength, bring their wisdom, bring their purity, and bring their healing into the ceremony. Then we invoke our teachers, we invoke our ancestors, and then we invoke the altars and shrines. And what I do, which is a little bit non-traditional, but it's because I'm non-traditional. I'm not born here, but I've made ceremonies in so many places around the world. And so in addition to the altars of Pacham, Paklom, Shepotrel, Tzankuhil, and Nima Sabal, Alach Sabal, and the altars in Momostenango and this sort of thing, and Tikal and Toposhte, these altars that I've had the good fortune to be invited to make ceremonies in front of these pyramids and that. I'm also invoking places like Teotihuacan, places like the Cahuachi pyramid just south of Nazca, where I had the fortune to make ceremony on the top of that pyramid. Places like Merlin's Cave and Glastonbury Tor and the Lochru Cairns in Ireland. Dashur and places like that in Egypt, in Denmark, in Bulgaria, where I've made ceremonies. And so it's like we invoke these ceremonies. We invoke the energy that we created in each of these ceremonies to act like a foundation on which we're then going to go forward with the ceremony for today. And so it's like, you kind of maybe seen these pictures of where the pyramids are built, like Chichen Itza is a very famous one, where you've got a pyramid that's been built over another pyramid that's been built over another pyramid and this kind of thing. They've remodeled, they've rechanged, but it's like, it's saying, right, okay, we don't want to destroy, we don't want to get rid of that energy. What we want to use is that energy as a foundation for the ongoing. And so every ceremony builds on the previous ceremony, and we get more and more connected with the essences, with the offerings that we've made. And so this is what we go through, and I use my caracol at the beginning to call in the directions, to call in those energies. We then start the counting of the days, and this is the invocation of the 260 days of the calendar. And so we will call to each of the days. So, for example, today is Tihash, today is Belacheb Tihash. And so I will make an invocation to Tihash to begin with and talk about the properties so that people can understand, right, okay, what's the essence of Tihash about? What Tihash, the obsidian blade, is all about healing, It's about discernment. It's about cutting away the things that don't serve us. And, it's kind of like everything is like this. You come across something in your life, whether it's an idea, whether it's a person, maybe it's a place, maybe it's something or other that we come across, and for a point in time it serves us well. And then after a while, we realize if we don't move on from that, then it actually begins to hold us back. It actually begins to put us out of balance. And so we need to cut our attachment to that. And that's what this obsidian blade does. Now, I also see it as the warrior. And, you know, in the past, you would have had the Maya warriors that were fighting on behalf of the priest king of their dynasty, yeah? Whether it was, you know, Tikal or Washington or wherever it was. They would go and have these holy wars. You were fighting on behalf of your priest king, who was also the incarnation of the divinity on earth. And so the enemies of this divinity were naturally demons. And so all warriors were holy warriors. All wars were holy wars. And this is Tihash. It's cutting the evil out of the world in order that good may prevail. So this is where the healing comes in. Good is balance, yeah? Good is the light. Good is all of this kind of stuff coming in. And Tihash is cutting it out of the way. So on Tihash days, this is why we seek healing. This is why we seek to cut away and release whatever it is that ails us, whatever it is that makes us sick. And so, you know, during that point in time, I'll probably do a saturacion with agua florida and rosemary as well, like a cleansing of people to help them to release what no longer serves them. And then we'll burn that away in the fire. And we'll count the days. And so we'll count from 1 to 13. So we're going to count every aspect of Tihash. Hun Tihash, Keb Tihash, Oshib Tihash, Kahib Tihash, Hob Tihash. Wakib Tihash, Wukub Tihash, Washakib Tihash, Belcheb Tihash, Lahu Tihash, Khunlahu Tihash, Kablahu Tihash, Oshlahu Tihash. The 13 different aspects of Tihash. And we make our offering to the fire. And we ask for our healing, and we ask for our release. Okay? And so we'll then follow with each of the Nawales as we go through this cycle of the 20 Nawales, as we go through the cycle of the 260 days. The way that I like to do it is to weave these things together, because the Mayan world is all about weaving. That's how we create. That's what we're doing, you know, whether we're looking at construction or birth or whatever it is, we're always weaving. And so within the essence of Tihash, what we are looking at over the next 20 days is how Tihash is going to weave through that, yeah? And so we're talking about cutting, we're talking about healing. Well, the next day is Kawok, and so it's kind of like, thank you, Kawok, for healing that which Tihash has cut. Achpu, it's like, okay, now we see the divinity. The Tihash has helped us to discern, to cut away the things that stopped us seeing the divinity and stuff. It's cut away the imbalances. Maybe it's cut away, you know, we might have the very English phrase of like people pulling the wool over your eyes. Well, Tihash is the one that cuts through that, right? Tihash is the one that cuts through anything which is stopping you from seeing the truth. And Achpu could be seen in its highest form as being the truth. So thank you, Hal Tihash, for helping us to see the truth, the divinity of Achpu. So I go on and on and on through this, weaving the days together, weaving the Nawales together, weaving their essences together, until we've counted all 20 of the days. We then make another saturacion. We go to the fire and we draw the essence from the fire. We've got all 20 of the Nawales sitting around the fire, listening to our words, consuming these offerings. And we make this saturacion where we 13 times draw the essence of a fire through our energetic fields to draw in strength or healing or wisdom or whatever it needs. We have a little time for a little bit of consejo, like what sometimes people get a very strong message from the fire, because as we're making the fire, all sorts of things happen. Sometimes the wind will come in really strong. Sometimes you get what they call a remolino, which is like this little tornado that forms within the fire. They're really amazing, and it's a really strong signal that something is being listened to, that something is being received, that there's something going on. And it's at that point that you take note, okay, what was the fire saying? What were we saying? What were we asking for at that point when the remolino formed? How does that work? We might get birds come in. We might get butterflies circle above the fire. I mean, I tell you, during these fires, I have seen some things which, they don't exactly defy logic, but they're not that far off. It's like if you ask a question, you got to keep your eyes and ears open, because you're asking for an answer to come in, and the answers come in, but it's not like somebody starts speaking to you. It's not like a big booming voice in your ear, although sometimes it can be. It's more like an animal will come and show you something. Nature will come and show you something. The wind will show you something. The birds will show you something. The butterflies, the bees, the lizard that lives under my altar will pop out at random moments to say hello. You know, it's all of these kind of things all wrapped up together. Sometimes the intuition comes through. Sometimes there's tears. There's floods of tears as people release what they don't need anymore. They burn it away. And there's tears as people realize kind of like, right, okay, this is our rebirthing point. We can rebirth every 20 days. We can rebirth every 8 days, however it wants. But there's ways that it aligns. So we go through that, and then eventually we close up the fire. We ask for the grandparents to go back to their directions again. We thank them for the strength, the wisdom, the purity, and the healing that's come through the ceremony. And then we all have a hug. And that's really kind of like sort of a brief description of how the ceremony is developed.
It's crazy, man. You really walked through step by step. I think you did a good job of painting a detailed picture, at least detailed enough.
Thank you.
Yeah, it was good, because it's a bit of a mystery for people who are on the outside, like me and Eagle, and we might read some book or some blog or website or whatever, and we get a very brief peek, one photo or something like that, and the rest is sort of left up to our imagination, and so obviously it leaves a lot of unanswered questions, so it's good.
Well, it's kind of like I've occasionally thought of like I've occasionally thought of streaming ceremony, but I don't really have a signal down there.
Not yet, no.
No, and it's something kind of like, it's like, I mean, there's no way I'm ever going to be mic'd up or anything like that. It's kind of like there would have to be a lot left to the imagination. But one thing I did do once was just put a timer on my camera and shot time lapse of ceremony. And you can find on my Facebook page, there's a couple of videos. I think it was Washikip Kawok, and I can't remember the other one that I did. But there was a couple of videos where I time-lapsed it just so that you could see kind of like how the fire develops and this sort of thing. But, it's kind of like when the camera lacks movement, when it's kind of just locked off, which is the only way I want it to be, because I don't want like someone sticking a lens in my face or anything like that during a ceremony.
Sure.
But it's like, if I can leave something over there that's passively doing something and just recording the moment, then at least it gives people an impression of it. It's like, right, okay, like I say, have a look on my Facebook page and you'll see the Washikip Kawok ceremony. You'll see me separating out all the offerings. You'll see me placing them down. I'm kind of like talking about calling the directions. I name each Nawal as I'm invoking it as I go around my altar. And that's kind of 3 hours of ceremony condensed down into, I don't know, something like 2.5, 3 minutes or something like that.
I could digest that, all right.
Because this is, it's like one of the things which, it's always, well, I hope that I do things justice. I hope that I do a good job. That's all I really want to do, because the civilization, the information, the counting of time, the astronomy, the what they made here, what they did here, is one of the most remarkable things that I've ever come across in any culture, whether it's Egyptian or Japanese or whatever it is. They really had their fingers on the pulse here,
They're scientists.
Yeah.
This is science. It's it's a very repeatable, measurable, reliable, very deep science. And I'm convinced of that. It's amazing. I agree with you.
And that, like, when we look at, like, the Egyptians or this sort of thing, I mean, the Romans were tourists in Egypt, right? The Romans went, like, tootling around the pyramids. Napoleon was a tourist in Egypt. It was accessible, yeah? And here, I mean, they're still digging stuff up. This is very fresh. We're talking about, like, 150 years of modern research into stuff. No more than that. Compared to like Egypt, what is donkey years old with regards to where they've set stuff out and what they knew, or what they think they know as well. I mean, there's a lot of room for improvement there as well, in my opinion.
Well, also the original culture of Egypt's long gone.
Yeah.
Whereas the original culture in Guatemala is still kicking around in some small corners.
Yeah, well, it's kind of interesting when you go to the Egyptian sites and you've got the antiquities police, and then you've got the old guys that are the original Guardians or descended from the original Guardians, and they show you some stuff which you don't get to see otherwise. I mean, when I was there, I had these old guys that were coming up to me and they're like, come and put your hand here and then look there. And you get all sorts of weird stuff happening, and you're like, well, okay, this wasn't in the brochure, and this is kind of like tapping into the original magic, right?
Sure, that's true. This necklace is still kicking around.
It's just more hidden, It's kind of like with everywhere we get successive conquests, whether they're religious or political or whatever they are. But there's still the underbelly. There's still something that survives. They just take it underground a bit, and you just have to scratch beneath the surface to find it. Mm-hmm. Now, the interesting thing here is, it's like with this LiDAR scan that they did of Peten and found out, like, that the civilization up there was probably 10 times bigger than they'd originally estimated. It was so much bigger. And, when we did the El Mirador trek again this year, when you're walking through those jungles in Peten, you're walking past site after site after site after site, settlement after settlement. They're not marked. The only way that you really see them, I mean, they're little mounds here and there, and really you know them because it's looters' trenches through them, which is the sad thing about it. But there are hundreds upon hundreds of unexcavated sites in Peten because there's just no funding to do it all. And honestly, I think if they did fund it, they'd have to chop down half the forest anyway to get it,
Yeah.
And that's not really what we want to do. But this culture up there was so much more extensive than what we were originally given to believe from the original exploration.
I never believed the claim that it was just this small little thing. I had always, I would say, the gut feeling that it was a massive thing. And then when they found it, I was more like, yeah, see, I told you, that was always my feeling that it was a big thing. And I always found there was dismissiveness from archaeologists and academics, that they would come up to something that was grand and they would just dismiss it. And they go, look at this amazing old thing with some Mayan scratching on it. Who knows what it means? Who cares? And then they would just be so in awe of how old it was, but rather than what the Mayan scratchings were actually, it was a very detailed calculation of some biological system, whether it's a planetary system or you name it, a weather system, all kinds of systems that they were measuring and observing. But that goes, nobody really, they just skim over it and brush it off. And so I think you obviously got the flu as well, or a bit by the bug or whatever, but there's something very, very fascinating in there. And it's an amazing thing to witness or, to observe, I guess.
Yeah. So this is my kind of my thing is, I just want to just to say this, it's this is my thing with the ceremony. It's kind of this is what connects us back to that ancient knowledge, that ancient wisdom. And, obviously I train traditionally, I do my ceremonies in English, and that's kind of entertaining in one way, but also kind of like my teachers sort of saying, thank you for bridging this knowledge out to the world. Thank you for showing kind of how can we put it, almost like the glory of the Mayan culture out to the audience. Because if I was sitting there making my ceremonies in Tutahil, Quichean, and yes, of course, I mean, I've already recited the numbers to you in Quichean this morning, but it doesn't do what it needs to do. It doesn't get that essence, that juice over to the people that start to tap into their own creativity through it. And so this is kind of where I'm always trying to be respectful of the culture here, but also acting as a bridge to show just how incredible these systems are to the world. I want to get it out there.
I would say it's our role. I mean, obviously you being there with, boots on the ground, but I mean, I'm all the way over here, and I'm doing this whole thing virtually, right? And Eagle as well. I mean, I've known Eagle for, I don't know how long exactly, 7-8 years or something.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, right. Wow.
Yeah, we've been following the Tzolk'in for that long. But and for me, it's been a remote experience. But go on, Paul. You started to say something.
No. Basically, I was just saying the same thing. I've been doing this all remotely, virtually, and I feel that it's my, I'm that link in the chain. It's I'm not supposed to be there, otherwise we'd be there. I'm supposed to be here, and hopefully I'll spread this out. This is a small victory for me, but I had 450 downloads for the podcast.
Wow.
And, and I thought that was really great. By podcast metrics, it's pretty small, but I thought about, those are 450 people, and that's 450 more people that didn't get to hear or learn or got to share their interest in this subject. So I feel very, 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 very humbled and excited about that. Wow, that's awesome that I can participate at all. So and you go ahead, Eagleman.
No, I'm just. I think that it makes our at least what Paul said in terms of what the mission is, it becomes really clear, because I've also been fascinated by the science of it and the fact that it makes a good, on one side there's the science and the mathematics of it, and then on the other side is everything to do with balancing energy and the spirit world, and there isn't no real duality, only because between those two, and so for me it is important to get the message out, and it is important also to at least touch upon and talk about how this message has been in some way contaminated and distorted via the dream spell system. and I get stuff here also in Israel, and people that are still adhering to that, and as long as we guys, as long as we recognize, as long as I recognize the filters that I use to look at this knowledge, and the fact that I'm doing it remotely and not doing the ceremonies, it really helps for me, and I hope for people listening to the podcast to hear these kind of accounts from people who, like you, Marc, that actually do that, and learn that from the people who've been doing that before. And this is the only way we can really keep it real and genuine and close to, as close as we can get it to what's actually the living culture.
Well, I wanted to say something real quick about that, which was that, my original intention with the podcast was not necessarily to try to dig into the tradition, but more to dig into how it affected the suburbs,
Yeah.
It's like, I wanted to reach out to so-and-so in the suburbs in Wales, and da-da-da in the suburbs in Tel Aviv, and somewhere in Ohio. And I wanted to see, like, yo, man, what's this doctor in Ohio doing studying the Zolkin? And how did that affect his suburban life, and so forth. The laundry list of all kind of variety of people that have touched this thing, even in a small way, but it had a profound effect on them and the people around them. And I always thought that was so fascinating, because it had that effect on me. I took one hit of this Zolkin acid, and then next thing you know, I'm going to music festivals, and I'm wearing a bandana, and I joined a band, and I dropped out of school, and next thing you know, I'm a roadie at the what's that band that everybody goes to see all the time? Wasn't it Tragically Hip? What was it called? That band it's like Fish, or what was the original? The Grateful Dead. That's it.
Right.
Grateful Dead roadie,
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So.
Yeah. It's whilst I was rather tender about it, the dream spell for me is one of these things which Tihash helps you to cut away. My first introduction to Maya calendars was through the dream spell.
Sure.
And that was like 20 years ago.
Wow, that's a long time.
That's how long I've been kind of doing this stuff, right? So what it did was it gave me an understanding that there are different ways of counting time.
Sure.
And I started with that. It's a bit like having training wheels on your bike, but then you realize that the dream spell, there's a lot of ill feeling towards it from down here. People really are very upset about that all.
Sure.
And one of the most important things is that it's not aligned. That whole day out of time thing, well, that's I have to watch my words here, but that's a very out of harmony, because it's out of harmony with any count. That day out of time was actually, I think it was New Year's Day in 1526 or something like that. So what we could say was that the dream spell was actually correct 500 years ago, more or less, and since then it's drifted out of the way, okay? So we have that. But at the same time, it is a step. But there is a point in time where we have to cut away the falsehood that came in, the attachment that we have to that step, in order so we can actually walk forward, and we can walk forward with the correct count of time, which is what is being counted here by the Maya people. You know, this is like, so, you know, people call it the true count, the real count, the keychain count. Here they just call it the calendar. You know, this is
what is the calendar?
And the other one's just not the calendar, right?
Well,
so this is the way I look at it. But this is kind of like I say, I don't like to play things down too much because that's a necessary step in our evolution. We can't always dive straight into the high energy stuff. Sometimes we need the transformer on the way.
Well, I'll tell you, I want a few things to say about that. First is that Eagle and I both jumped in via the Carl Kalaman, I don't know what you would call it, 2012 sort of calendar thing, system, lecture. There was a lecture that this guy was doing, and it grabbed me at the right time, man. I must have been 20 years old or something like that, and I just thought, this guy was basically the same thing. Was he introduced the idea that there's another way of counting time, by the way, and it just blew my mind away. And as I followed the breadcrumb trail, eventually I realized that this thing wasn't the real thing, but there was enough clues that pointed me towards the real tradition of the Chol-E or you know, putting the days in order. And then and Eagle and I both shared that. Like, that's how we both, you know, jumped into the whole Zolkeen thing. And I want to say one more thing about that, which was I had a friend that lost his mind. Like, he really he went crazy. And you know, I realized at that point that it was good that this isn't for everybody. It's not. There's a reason that it was put high up on the shelf, away from all the kids. It's because it's not for everybody. Like, it belongs to the people who get it. And like, if you didn't get it, it's not for you. And not to say like, you know, you shouldn't have it, or I'm better than you, or nothing like that. But it's like, you're fighting with fire, and like, you have to be very careful, you know. And there's a reason it was put up on the top shelf, you know.
It's a very powerful tool.
That's right.
You know, it's kind of like you don't let your 3-year-old play with your circular saw, do you? You know.
No,
you can build your house with your circular saw, but you know, it's like you gotta get trained, you gotta get understanding, you gotta start off with, you know, kind of like understanding other tools before you move into it. So,
I've heard Mayan people say that about the dream spell, saying like, thank God there's a dream spell which keeps all the dummies away.
No.
And it was, you know, it was in the same thing, like, yo, don't give a circular saw to a 3-year-old because like, while he's high, he might cut his hand off or something. Like, not to say 3-year-old's high, but the guy on the dream spell is obviously high.
Yeah. Yeah. But like I say, I mean, I try not to run anything down because there's a place for everything in one way or another, but it's not really well received here, let's say, in general. But that's why we exist. That's why we do it. And, you know, one of the other things that dawned on me as I this morning, just before we started talking, I was just walking, and like walking to San Marcos and back, looking at the lake, looking at the mountains, walking past Chapotrel and these sacred places, and thinking about things, and thinking about the way that we do things. You know, and just realizing that there is a place for this, and that we do these things in the way that we do them, and that we are here as transformers, as translators, in order to do that.
I think you're doing a great job of that. You know, I think it's a good, you know, just like that guy said before, bridge. It's a great bridge, especially for people that they don't have access to the, you know, the place where you live. You know, not everybody can go to Lake Atitlan, so, you know, via you, they can touch the culture just a little bit. And I think it's a great, you know, it's a great thing you're doing.
There's also something that came to me, which is about, you know, they say that over 7 years, all the cells in your body will renew. Yeah. Something like that.
I heard something like that, yeah.
And it's like, if you think that your body is made up of molecules and atoms which have been basically programmed energetically by your environment. And for me, one of the things that we see people, they come to Guatemala, they come and spend 3 months here or something like that. Sometimes they might pay a bunch of money and get given a barra in Antigua or something like that. Sometimes they come and they do these things, and they go back and they're kind of like they're trying to write about stuff and that. For me, it's like, you really like, and you know, I don't mean to be kind of blowing my own trumpet, as it were, but it's like, you don't really get into it until you've been here 7 years, until you've been totally infused, until your physical body is made of the atoms and molecules that came from the energy of this land. That's when you really start to feel it. That's when you're part of this land, and this land is part of you. And as I say, we're all doing what we can But I really feel that's at least how long it takes to get an understanding of the way that things are seen, the way that things are thought about. And it's kind of like, for me, that's what I'm trying to translate out. And, I'm still learning. I'm still very much learning Tsutohil, because I live in a Tsutohil village, and I'm learning little bits here and there, and I'm daily having little conversations here and there. And I mean, Eagle, I recognize kind of like your language there. And so for me, learning Tsutohil is a bit like me trying to learn Hebrew. There is very little connection, if any, between a European language and Tsutohil, because it's an ancient language. It's totally different structure. It's like, and so it's not easy for me to get my head around. But when you learn the language, that changes the way that you think, and you start to think like the people who speak that language, because that's the way that your mind is making that language come from your mouth. And so if this again for me is, it's probably the next learning, and it will probably take me another 7 years to get there with the Tsutohil, but I'm trying,
Did you feel a special connection the first time you made it there? I mean, first time you visited? I mean, I understand what you're saying, but I'm just trying to say, I mean, if I'll take you back to just the first time that you got there, did you already feel like a special connection to the place?
Yeah. I mean, well, I can tell you a story about how I got here if you want to hear it, about how I ended up traveling to Central America.
Sure.
So, like in 1998, I was going to travel with somebody, and we were going to do the standard British backpacker route, the kind of like the one that wrote the manual, go to India, then go to Vietnam and Thailand and Australia, and kind of follow that same trail, follow the rest of the people and that. And when we were doing that, I decided, right, okay, I wanted to be fresh if I do this. I want to cut my ties and just be free and see what happens, yeah? So I owned a house at the time, and I put my house on the market. And this was in the September of 1998. Yeah. And people kept saying to me, so you're still going to travel? And I'm like, yeah, when I sell my house. And they're like, well, where are you going to go? And I'm like, India, Vietnam, Thailand, Australia, blah, 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 blah. And in February of 1999, I was having a conversation with somebody on the phone, and they said, so you're still thinking about traveling? You were talking about that. And I'm like, yeah, when I sell my house. And they're like, well, where are you going to go first? And I don't know what happened, but I just said Mexico. And the very next day, a couple came round. This is the first phone call I'd had about my house. This couple phone up, they come round, they look at my house, and they buy it there and then. And it was just like, the universe was not going to let me go in the wrong direction. My connection with India, well, I like curry. I mean, that is honestly the total connection I have with India,
and so, it's not bad.
Yeah, exactly. So it was kind of like I was guided. I was shown, right, okay, you have now made the right choice. You've now said the correct word. You've made the correct invocation. This is where you're supposed to be going. And I came over here, and I spent time traveling around Mexico, and then came down into Belize, and then finally into Guatemala, and spent a whole bunch of time in Guatemala. And I actually came to San Marcos in, I think it was August of 1999, if I remember rightly. That was my first introduction here. There was no electricity, and it was, I mean, of course, it was a very, very different place then. But the lake got me, and that was that. And I swore that I'd be back out here kind of like very shortly, and it ended up taking me 8 years until 2008 to get back out here. And in 2008, I finally left the UK. I said, right, okay, I'm going to go and do what I need to do. I'm going to go and live this life, or at least I'm going to go and try. I'm going to go and see what happens if I break out of this UK system, if I make my life for myself. And so I started off in Colorado and New Mexico, going to visit some friends up there. I then came down to Guatemala, and I came out to the lake, and I came out to San Marcos on, I think it was the 18th of December 2008. And I spent 3 weeks here, which felt like 3 months in the best possible way. And then I went off to Bolivia and Peru and Brazil, and spent a few months down there. And all I could think of while I was down there is like, I have to get back to San Marcos, the lake. This side of the lake is my home. That was that. There was no other choice. I knew it was home. And so I came back here and I started just having things open up for me in ways that maybe that didn't happen for everybody. It was like between whether we say that I was called here. I mean, I didn't get this big, Luke, you must go to the Dagobah system or anything like that thing. You know? But it was like, you know, when everything just opens up, when the path that you're walking is so free and easy to walk along, it's like you're being constantly supported and shepherded along that way, which eventually kind of like led me to the Momostanango, which eventually led me to taking the training and accepting my bara and being initiated, and here I am, you know.
That's amazing.
It is.
So, yeah. That's how I got here. Well, that's, you know, kind of like how we are, where we're talking today. And, you know, it's when I look at this weaving, and when I look at the, you know, in particular on the days, or when I'm calling it and I'm talking about the weaving of the path, and I realize that every person around that fire, every decision they've made in their life has actually brought them to that point in time and space. That we've woven our realities, that we've woven our paths together, and maybe they're just going to meet me just for that fire. Maybe we're just together for that 2-3 hours. That's where we weave our paths together, and then our paths diverge again. They take that fire back out into the world. They change their life. They burn away that pain, that what they were carrying, that burden that they no longer need to carry. They invoke, they connect, whatever it is, through that fire, and then they go back out into the world with that fire in their heart. And they weave their path in a different direction, and that's, again, you know, that's what we're here for. You know?
I got a question, because you know, there's a lot of, let's call them Zolkeen fans, or students, you could say, you know, globally sprinkled all over, and we're catching some of them with this broadcast. But you know, you are actually, you know, one of us, but you jumped right into the deep end. And I mean, I would say, like, on behalf of everybody, we're all kind of jealous of you a little bit, you know, just because, you know, in the best way, you know, like, you know, you actually are there, and I can almost live vicariously through you in that way, you know, and you could relay things to me that a local can't, just because, you know, you're an Englishman. So, you know, I can communicate with you, you know, in a much more easy way. Do you ever encounter any kind of racism or anything like that? Discrimination, we could call it. You know, for being a gringo, for being an outsider. How does that play out? What's that like?
It's interesting, you know. It's kind of like I've had things which have we were recently making a documentary, and I was taking the documentary team to meet some of the elders and my teachers and this sort of thing, and the elders were saying how happy they were, how pleased they were that there was somebody who was taking such an interest in their work, that was somebody who was so dedicated to the culture here, and who's acting as a bridge to get it out there. Right. It was like I've kind of like I've walked the path. I've put my energy. You know, it's kind of like this isn't free. I have to put my energy. I have to put my financial energy into buying offerings, into doing these things, and sure, I get stuff coming back to me, and it's usually multiplied and all this sort of thing. But you know, there's an exchange there. This felt like a wonderful validation from these elders and from these teachers to say, that's okay, he's got our stamp of approval to do this.
Yeah.
And I don't know if you guys have picked up, but recently I've started making videos about the Trasenas and kind of like how we can follow them, what they're going to bring into our lives, and how we can connect with them, how we can best use our energy in that time.
Yeah.
And I had one local guy here, a young guy, who kind of flamed me for it.
Okay.
Who kind of said, you know, what right do you have to do this? And I'm just like, well, I have actually been, you know, we're very, very careful about what we do. We're never about making enemies. We're always about trying to create harmony. And I'm just like, well, you know, thank you for bringing this up. And yeah, what right do I have as a foreigner to do this? But I have done the best that I can to go down the route, to learn authentically, to learn from one of the most traditional parts of Guatemala, up in Momostanango. I mean, you have to do it properly down there. That's not tourist town up there. You know, I was just up there for Washiki Bats, and I was like the only European tourist in town. There were people from like other parts of Guatemala there, I walk into Paja and they're like, veo un gringo. You know, it's kind of like, but it was more of a like, wow, what's the white bloke doing here? This is different kind of thing. And then, you know, but I'm not there taking pictures. I'm there going to the altars where they've got the big public fire burning and putting my candles in and making my day count and this sort of thing. And they're like, oh, okay, right, he's actually doing the work. So there's a kind of like, there's a first view of it. And then there's a realization that it's like, oh, hang on, this guy isn't just kind of like taking, you know, like I say, a tourist here. This guy knows something or something like that. And yeah, so there is that part of it. Then there's the part of it where, you know, I have the local guys, some of the fishermen that park their kayakos down on my beach, down by the lake and that. I say my beach, the beach that I'm a steward of, let's say, is a better way.
Yeah.
And you know, they say to me, well, you know, I think I've got this, you know, would you do a divination for me? And I'm like, well, yeah, okay. And they're like, and would you make a ceremony with me? And I'm like, well, yeah, okay, but aren't there, you know, what about your people up in the village? And they're like, well, you know what? The people in the village, then they go to the cantina and then they talk. And so everybody knows my business, and you don't associate yourself in those places. I'm not like a big drinker like that, and I don't go into those places. And so they feel kind of like a sense of safety. And so I play a different role.
Sure.
So yeah, you know, and I've been in ceremonies where there's been, you know, the majority of the people and certainly the majority of the elders that I met have been delighted that there's somebody that's come here and they've not tried to open a yoga studio. They've not tried to do this, do that, because we've got a lot of that in San Marcos, you know, and I'm not running anything down, but there's not that many people here that come here to actually work with the local culture. And I've made these ceremonies where I feel out of place because I'm the only foreigner there, let's say.
Yeah.
And I'm going around to all of these people from the village. There's like 40 people from, you know, indigenous people from the village there. And at the end, you go around and we shake hands or hug everybody else that's in the circle, right? And these people are saying, thank you for helping to keep my culture alive. It's a shame that the children of the village aren't as enthusiastic about our culture as you are.
Huh.
And so I take that as a good sign. You know, I take that as my validation for that one person that comes along and says, hey, go, what you doing here, or this sort of thing. When I start counting in Quiche, and they're like, hang on, he knows some of the language, he knows some of this, he knows some of that. And so I try to let my words and my energy speak for what I'm doing. Rather, you know, I'm not here to fight any battles. If people don't like what I do, it's not my fault. It's not, you know, it's kind of like it's up to them. It's their problem. It's their issue. But really, I'm not here to antagonize anything and that either. So I just try and keep the peace, and I just try and explain if people don't like it. I'm like, right, okay, well, why don't you like it? What can I do to show you my respect for the culture here? What can I do to show you that I'm just trying to show that your ancestors had something which is so special and can help to bring harmony to our world? Because, you know, a lot of the people, I'll show them pictures of Tikal, and they're like, oh, where's that then? Who built that then? I'm like, your great-grandfathers built that, you know? This is your lineage. Please understand, please. It's about time we brought some pride in the culture of their ancestors back to the people of this land, because for 500 years they've been told their ancestors are savages, their ancestors knew nothing, all of these things that the conquistadores have put on top, and they should be saying, you know what, our ancestors were one of the most advanced civilizations in the world, and we should be celebrating that.
Word. That's a good. I couldn't agree more. You know, you really wove the right words together with that one. That's a beautiful summary.
Thank you.
Yeah.
I have a question.
Sure.
Well, I've always wondered about the Nahuales and the way I mean, you can use the symbolism and all the meanings of the Nahual to describe a person, or to have some idea about their their gifts and their weaknesses and stuff like that. I've done a lot of readings, sort of like once I know someone's Mayan birthday, I tend to remember that, even though I don't meet the person again for a long time. But anyway, so you can use the symbolism and the meanings to describe a person, but at the same time you use the same. I mean, you use the Nawal also to describe the day. So
Yes.
how do you? I don't know. What's the verb? Maybe to reconcile, or what is there a difference? Is there? What's the dynamic between those two things?
Okay, so I honestly, I like when I'm doing a reading for somebody, obviously we go into a great deal of detail on what the challenges and what benefits are of the Nawal that they carry. For me, it's a blueprint that they have chosen to invoke when they were conceived into this humanity. When their soul incarnated into this body, they chose a path, they chose a mission. And that mission is represented by their Nawal. And their Nawal brings them the entire toolkit that they need in order to complete that mission. But it also brings them the script for that mission, the challenges that come along. And so we'll go into great detail. It brings us along like the allies on that path, the masculine allies, the feminine allies, the allies from their ancestors, and the allies that they find in the children on that path when we look into their cross. So this is the way that we could develop it on that way. But at the same time, it's really important, that whole thing about the day, well, that's a microcosm of that path. And so we can see the same things happening. So when we look at it as guidance for the day, it's like, right, okay, where are we best going to put our energy into that day? I mean, we might say 9 Tihash today, okay, Balachet Tihash. We're looking at healing. We're looking at cutting. We're looking at renewal in one way, cutting away the old, refreshing it. And the 9 being about life and this sort of thing. And so it's kind of like healing life. It's about going to the healing women, using asking the women for how they can contribute to heal duality, to heal, to heal the wounds, as one way or another. And so this is something for a 90 hash day. Now, it's not saying about, right, okay, what else could we look at? We could look at weaving. We could look at all the properties of the other Nawalas. It's like, well, we can do anything. We have free will, supposedly, right? So you could, if you wanted to go on a journey today, you could go on a journey. But an F day might be a better way of doing that. Mm-hmm. And so it's getting aligned to what's a favorable thing to do on a particular day and using the properties of the Nawal to guide that. Now, if I was somebody who was carrying Balachet Tihash, then it would be something that I would say that my life could well be about healing. It could well be about medicine. It could well be about being a warrior as well. It was kind of funny. I met somebody. I can't actually remember what number she was. She might have been Balachet Tihash. She might well have been Balachet Tihash. I was doing this kind of like off-the-cuff reading for her. And I just told her, well, you've got the essence of the healer and the essence of the warrior together. And that's your life path. That's the 9. This is about the woman that develops that life path and all this sort of thing. And she just started laughing and laughing and laughing. And I said, why are you laughing? She said, well, I'm a medic in the army. I'm a doctor in the army. So she literally was the warrior and the healer in one place, and she was a woman. And so Balachet Tihash she was following what her Nawal was most favorably putting up as a life path for her in one facet of it. So we could, if we said there was 260 different professions, well, we could follow a different profession each day.
See, that's one question that I've always wondered. As soon as I sort of discovered this thing, my mind went to the possibilities, and I thought, what kind of civilization knows what job the kids are going to have? It's like, look at this kid. He's a born ranger. Get out there. And they put him in the forest, and he never comes back. This guy is the, this guy is the money guy. Look at him. Look at him go with the money. Yeah. You give the kid a stack of money, and he's an accountant. He was a born accountant. And what kind of society functions like this? And I thought about the school system. Imagine a classroom that was full of you got 50-ish kids all together. What does that look like?
Yeah.
Et cetera, et cetera. And that's
what's a bag of cats, isn't it?
Yeah, man. My class would be the best, obviously. It would just be what a wild concept for civilization and how it would function it would be miraculous to see this thing work, this whole clock just all moving in the gears. That's what I thought when I first really touched it and went I think I know what this thing is. You can really see it for the first time. Oh my God, is this thing really what I think it is? Yeah. And I think that the three of us, I think we got a I mean, I would say I don't know the depth of it because it's infinitely deep. It seems like, but like it's obviously like gears. You know, it's the universal gears or something like that.
Absolutely.
You know, it's really it's the inner machinery of the universe or the world or whatever. Yeah.
You know, and it's like if you, I don't know. Okay, I'm gonna. Who drives? Do you drive?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Do you drive auto or do you drive stick?
Oh, I got auto.
Yeah, me too.
Right. Okay.
Unfortunately.
Right. Okay. So
Yeah.
it all depends on kind of when you were raised and where you were raised. Because like I mean, I can drive auto, of course, but like I usually drive stick because that's what all my cars have ever been, right?
Oh,
now,
okay.
if you imagine that the calendar is like this gearbox, and you're just learning to drive stick, you know, it's every time you try and change it.
Sure. Yeah. I've been there.
It's all about timing, yeah? It's about knowing when to push the clutch, when to move the lever, and when to release the clutch, and all of that kind of thing, yeah? So what the calendar is, yes, a gearbox, yes, a series of cogs all moving together. And what it's bringing is social harmony. I describe it as Mayan social engineering, okay? And what it's telling us is, if you follow this path, then you are fulfilling your soul's purpose. You're fulfilling the script that you wrote before you incarnated. But, you know, kind of like our mums, our dads, or whatever, thankfully not mine, but, you know, they're driven by this kind of social thing. Oh, little Johnny, he's got to be a dentist. Oh, little Jenny, she's got to be a lawyer. Or, you know, dentists, lawyers, medical, and this sort of thing. And so they put us through school, or they put them through school, and there's 3 months in the job, and they're going, right, that's it. I just can't do this anymore. I was never cut out for this. I want to be an artist or whatever.
Yeah.
If we stopped, and I've done this with a midwife in California, who I've been doing readings for babies that are born.
Right.
And what we do is we do the reading so that we streamline into kind of like a very narrow stream of you must do this. It's like, hey, they got bats. Make sure they have paper, crayons, musical instruments around them. See what they're drawn to. Allow them to develop that talent from an early age. Because, you know, if you're thinking that little kid wants to be a doctor from an early age and all he wants to do is draw pictures, let him draw pictures. Make sure that he has an education in the sciences, in languages, in mathematics. I'm all for a rounded education, but give them the tools and the ability to express their true talent from the beginning, you know?
Right. Well, and people, they suffer greatly if they're not aligned with their novel. Like, you can really fall off the horse in a really terrible way. And then, you know, it seems to be that how can I say, the musical instrument gets tuned, all in tune when they start, you know, acting aligned with their novel. I've seen it again and again and again and again. You know, and so you could, in that case, it's like you could really avoid a lot of pain, you know, by just seeing which way is north.
Yeah.
You know? I've seen
absolutely.
it. And it was, I wanted to say too, just about how you were talking about Tihash, like with the healer, the army lady, like who's a warrior, and the healer, an army doctor. It's like, that's somebody who's really in harmony with their novel. Like, maybe she wasn't aware that she was Tihash, but it doesn't matter because she was living it every day. Perfectly. You know, but like, you were being so kind. Like, I don't know, man, you maybe you just have like a softer way with words. Like, Tihash can be really brutal. That's a tough novel a lot of times. So there's some painful lessons there. And so like, hopefully it would be those wonderful things that you said, but like, that might not necessarily be the case. And like, there's brutal things to be said about all the novels, as well as the inspiring poetry, you know, something like that. You know what I'm saying?
Well, it's nature, isn't it? I mean, like, we get like nature. We're thinking of flowers and hummingbirds and squirrels and little fluffy bunnies and stuff like that. But you know, nature just came through Great Britain with 100-mile-an-hour winds and killed 2 people as well. And that's the other side of it. Nature is the gnashing jaws of the jaguar. It's the the fertile ants. It's the bushmaster. It's the snakes. It's the scorpions. You know, that's all nature as well. And it's like, it's dropping our judgment and realizing that everything is part of that. That Tihash, the obsidian blade, that warrior that's going out, that sharpness that Tihash can have, it's sharp for a reason. Everything plays its role, but there's a difference between things just being their nature and things being done through I don't know, a sense of gain through greed, through avarice, through lust, through those kind of things as well. You know, it's kind of like when, if we're talking about warriors, if we're talking about the people that are bringing peace through cutting away those that are causing trouble, if we're talking about those that are bringing healing through cutting away that which is out of balance, that's one thing. If we're talking about those that are kind of like going in and, you know, kind of like going after the oil or something like that, that's a different thing. You know, so we have to kind of like quantify how we're looking at warriors, because when we look at the true holy warriors that are keeping the peace, I mean, I'm going back like with, I don't know if I ever talked about this, but like one of my other great interests and great things is Reiki and Aikido. And when we look at like the samurai and like the samurai, the being there in order to keep the peace, perfecting, becoming the ultimate warrior, not to go to war, but to prevent the war from happening by keeping the peace and your presence, your energy being the thing that keeps the peace. That is what Tihash is ultimately as well.
Sure, yeah. Tihash can be a very beautiful energy, you know. Yeah. And it can be one of the best for sure.
Yeah.
But yeah. I was reading. Have you ever read the book Time in the Highland Mayan?
I was just reading it yesterday, actually.
Yeah. So I was reading this part where they describe the Nahuals, and that book's brutal, man. They take a giant shit on my head in that book, and fair enough. I mean, you know, I not to say that it's undeserved, but you know what I mean, like in the descriptions, and honestly, man, she was just writing down what she was told. So I mean, you know, like it's not her fault that she said some kind things about some Nahuals, but some really let's call them painful or uncomfortable things about some other Nahuals, you know. And so and my reaction to those is always to push back, you know, like if somebody calls me an ass, I'll push you and say, well, you're an ass.
Yeah. Well, if you look at the Chimbelam of Kawa as well, it's like, I think it's from that, I can't remember, I think it comes out of Bob Bukransky's program, if I remember rightly. It's like what they have to say about Ish is like something like, bloody are his teeth, bloody are his claws, a murderer, a killer. That's what they have to say about Ish. And it's like, well, yeah, that's not really my kind of style, I have to say.
The funny thing about that is that like you being Ish, you could nod to that as well. Part of that's true. You know,
I have to say I'll never be a vegetarian, I think, but you know, other than that,
Well, I got this message from my friend Steve, who was reading the Time in Island Maya, and it's like he sent me a photo of the page, and it was like C. Basically, the description of C was a gay prostitute. This person is useless. Next. Yeah. And that was it. And it was just like, you know, I mean, we had a good laugh about it. It was funny. And I mean, and mine was not really much better than that. Cat was basically like, yeah, this person sucks. Next, you know. and I mean, I couldn't, I obviously I can't disagree completely. I'm like, well, some of that's true, you know, of course, you know, but there's obviously like, you know, like I said before, my reaction is, well, you know, well, fuck you, you're a gay prostitute. Fuck you, you know, like I got to push back and defend myself a bit. And so like, how can I say this thing is like there's all kinds of complexities and ways of looking at things and perceiving it and layers and you know what I mean? It's very complex.
Yeah, and I tell you the most complex and difficult thing from our side of things in our Western minds or Northern Hemisphere or however we're on it, like the way that we've been educated is that everything can be quantified, right? Everything has a standard. We're looking at ISO 9002 standardization on stuff. Mm-hmm. You go to 20 different aqiqab and you'll get 20 different definitions of what that Nawal is.
Right.
And there is no standardization. And I think part of it is, you know, it's like I was saying to somebody yesterday, I get maybe 30% of what I've got from reading books and stuff, and 70% of what I've got from talking to people and sitting around the fire. And as a consequence, my experience is guided because I'm looking at things through the lens of being 5-ish, born in the year 11 Eh, okay? Yeah. And so is a lens which shows me how I interact with that Nawal, what I think of the people that carry that Nawal. And I will say that, like, I meet these people who are carrying the same Nawal, and I do see the same energy in them. But it's my combination, it's what my energy brings out of them, it's what their energy brings out of me that gives me my perception of the experience of that Nawal. Now, when we talk about relationships and composite energies and this sort of thing, this is our experience, okay? And what each day keeper will tell you is what their experience is of that Nawal. So this is why you get some people where it's like, yeah, you know, okay, like this guy that was saying, oh, this bloke, this T energy that's basically a male prostitute. I mean, that's not my experience of T.
No,
not at all. But, you know, that guy, we might have found that his wife ran off with a Z-man or something like that, and so he's got a real negative image of Z. You know, this is kind of like, this is where that steps in.
Yeah, well, see, like, what I have to acknowledge, and we had a good laugh about it, it's just like, you know, man, Z is one of my favorite novels, actually. I really love it, and some of my favorite people. My favorite Z of all time is Bob Marley. It's like, you want to really see what Z can do? Look at Bob Marley. It's like, listen to the words that he chooses. You can't choose better words than this. This guy's a masterful poet. I mean, it's amazing what this guy can do. We had a good laugh about this. Like, you know, yeah, there's a shade of that that's true, of course. That's sort of why it was said. But it's also funny, you know, and you know, the same goes with me. And like, we were talking about East Milan a long time ago, and there's this guy who was in Germany, I think. He was in Germany or Romania. Anyways, this guy's named the Vampire of Dusseldorf. And he used to eat people alive. And his novel was 11 Ish. And we laughed because obviously it was 11 Ish. Who else could it be? You know? Et cetera, you know. And in my experience, every single novel has that. All of them. Yeah. You know, and some people lean towards this or that. Like, you'll read a lot of times that bats is just perfect, you know. Bats, and actually the pregnancy of bats is a perfect pregnancy. But man, this is some of the most difficult people I've ever encountered. Ever. You know? And it's for real. And it's just like, man, you know, when I'm pulling out my hair ready to punch this chick that I'm working with, you know, et cetera, and I'm like, don't tell me Bats is an angel. You know, I'm about to let a haymaker go right here. And not to diss, you know, anyone in particular, you know, but like everybody has these what do you call it? The underbelly, the dark side, the difficult part,
the shadow, the mirror, the dark mirror. It's all about the twins, you know. It's kind of like you've got like Bats in particular. They're great performers. They're great teachers because they love to be the center of attention.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. But if you stop allowing them to be the center of attention, that's when they kind of like stamp the foot a little bit and say, hey, me, I'm the greatest artist ever. And like, but you know, that said, some of my greatest friends and family are Bats people. So like, I know that there's a difference. But you see, you know, when we look at you as Cat and Bats together is Tikin, right? I think, if I remember it rightly off the top.
Oh, you put in the novel of the two people together, hey?
Yeah.
So you add them up. How does it work?
Creates.
How do you do the calculation?
Well, I number the Nawalas beginning with Yamosh as 1 because that's the way that we use it when we're doing mathematics with it rather than when we're doing ceremony with it. And so, like, we would have Cat as 4 and we would have Bats as 11. 11 plus 4 comes out as 15. 15 is Tsikin, and so you will end up with Tsikin as your composite energy.
You're crazy, man. I love this. Every time you talk to somebody, they got something else. Everybody's got something else going on with it, and it's fascinating. I haven't heard this before, so it's very, very cool. Please continue. I'm sorry to interject like that, but keep talking.
It's like, so you can look at it as, like, you can add up energies. So you can look at what you're, you know, I was saying about, let's say, today's a Tihash day, so you're looking at it through a Cat lens. Eagle, you're looking at it through the Tsikin lens, I guess.
Right.
No, my Nawal is Kanil.
Okay.
His name is actually Eagle.
Nice.
How do you say your name in Hebrew?
Eagle.
See? His name is actually Eagle.
So you're Washkim Anil. This is what you are. You're the wonderful. So you evolved from 13 Achpu, right?
That's right. Yeah, that's right.
Yeah. So this is, you know, kind of like, so anyway, so you're looking at the Tihash day through the Anil lens, and we can actually kind of like, if we said that we combine our own energy with the energy of the day to see what the essence of that day brings to us. And so we all have, some people say, I really love Tihash days, they're really good for me, and other people are like, I want to hide on Tihash days.
Right,
We create a composite with our own energy in the day, and so we're riding different subwaves of time within an overall general wave of time.
I think this
that's from our composite.
This is a very accurate description of the reality that we all live in. Because I've surveyed the grounds forever, and everybody has different experiences on different days. And for example, in my case, all of the supposedly favorable days, they're not that good for me, and all of the supposedly bad days, I love them. And so I've always had that experience, and so anything I read is questionable. But what you're saying, I think it's very, it rings really, really true. I think I agree.
I think there's ways of working with it as well, because it's like with favorable and unfavorable days, oftentimes it's favorable for this or unfavorable for that. And if we try and do something unfavorable on a particular day, we're going to have a bad experience. I mean, for me, Akbal days aren't always the best days. Akbal days are the best days for me to hide in my cave, kind of thing.
Me too. Akbal would be one of the most challenging novels in my case. Yeah, totally. And it gets so much praise in all the literature, and I could just kick dust in that direction. I'm like, praise, get out of here. But it's funny, and of course, some of my great friends are Akbal, and we can laugh about it and all the rest. But that's just my experience, and so I've always I don't trust stuff that I read anyways, and I think what you said, favorable for this or favorable for who? For you? Okay, but not favorable for me, or vice versa.
Yeah. And then you start to look at relationships, because once you start learning how to do composite energies, you start looking at all your past relationships, right? Yeah. You look at all the people that you've been associated with. And, so it's like, for me, if I'm associated with an ich woman, then the result is going to be achmach. Now, what's achmach about? I mean, it's about forgiveness, but where does the forgiveness come from? It comes from mistakes, because it's he of error, he of sin, he of whatever, it's not a good thing. Well, it's not a good thing from a certain perspective. Let's say it's a learning experience. But, if you're looking at, this is where, I'm not saying that you go into the bar, or maybe you're married or whatever, and, you're talking to somebody and you're like, what's your birthday? And you quickly go, nip into the loo and work out what their nawal is and go, no.
I almost do that. I'm pretty close. I got it on my smartphone, man. I'm not that far away from doing that. I mean, okay. But I'm also open to the possibility that anybody could be cool, So I have some prejudices about some nawals. However, I'm willing to give everybody a chance to prove me wrong, or the benefit of the doubt, But that being said, if I see some red flags up, I'm definitely got my eyes become sharp and I'm watching. Yeah. So I have to ask. You mentioned ik women. So do you have is that like a pattern? Do you constantly find ik showing up again and again?
No. It's actually kind of like a relatively. I don't want to go into too much, because I know
don't go into
public and this sort of thing. But let's say that kind of like I've had some pretty strong strong relationships with ik women in particular, and it was the last one I was like, oh, she's ik, okay, right. I kind of got an idea where this is going to go, and sure enough, it went there, and it's like, right, okay, yeah, I knew that. It's
That's hilarious.
Why am I? Yeah, and then it's. One of the things that I found is that a very interesting relationship to have is where the result is achpo. Because achpo is the divinity, it's the quest for the divine. So you're finding the divine within that relationship, yeah? So for you as cat, you'd be looking at, what would you be looking at? Achmach, cat and achmach together. 16 and 4.
Achmach drives me bananas.
And you're looking for Kane, right, Marc?
Me, yes.
Yeah, and it would probably drive you bananas, I think.
Kame is Paul's girlfriend.
That's true.
Okay. Well, actually, funnily enough, the first time I was traveling in Guatemala, if I might say so, I was traveling with an Israeli girl who was two Kame.
Yeah.
And that was a very, very important relationship.
Really?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Those Israelis travel, man. You see them in every corner of the world. It's interesting.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. I wanted to say something. Go ahead, Eagle. You had something to say?
Yeah, I have several questions, but go ahead. I mean, it's already, we can go on for a long time.
Oh yeah, definitely.
Yeah,
go ahead.
I actually have an appointment at 1, so we need to sort of
wind it down.
I've probably got about another 15 minutes. Would be good for me.
Well, let's do Eagle's questions because I'm just
absolutely. Yeah,
go ahead, Eagle. What you got?
Yeah, well, in terms of relationships, I mean, I just wanted to figure out how do you sum up, let's say, beyond 20? Because let's say you have 2 Achpu people meeting, what would that add to? I mean,
good question.
20. When you're working on base 13 and base 20 mathematics, okay? So if the numbers, let's say we have an 11 and a 5 together, right? Yeah. So 11 plus 5 is 16, but we're on a base 13 system, so we've got to take 13 away from that, and we're going to end up with 3.
3, right.
Okay?
And with the Nawales?
And with the Nawales, we're working on a base 20 system. So if we had, let's say we're going to add up Ish and Kawok together. Yeah. So we have 14 plus 19, which is going to come out at 33, yeah?
Yeah.
And so then we've got to take 20 away because we're on a base 20 system, and we're going to come up with Ach as the 13th Nawal.
Right, so Achpu and Achpu make Achpu.
That's right, yeah.
Got it.
And 13 and 13 make 13.
Right. Yeah, I always have these technical questions.
That's cool. Yeah, if you have a 13 Achpu person, basically whenever they form a relationship with somebody, the energy of the relationship will have exactly the energy of the other person.
Right.
This is why Achpu people are so great as mediums or counselors and stuff like that, because they are able to, the relationships that they form have the energy of the other person, yet without the emotional baggage of the other person, right? So they can see clearly what the issue is. But the problem is that they're very much like chameleon. So they are able, if you put them with a yoga teacher, they absorb the energy and become the yoga teacher. If you put them with a drunk, they absorb the energy and become the greatest drunk you've ever known. It's like they have to be very aware of their energy.
Holy shit.
That's amazing, actually. Wow,
that explains a lot.
That's my one takeaway from this podcast is that. I'm like, actually, that's very true. Damn, you did it. You hit the nail on the head. That's amazing, because I was going to say something about Achpu, which was, Achpu has a lot of difficulty. That's not a pretty path to walk. Like Achpu, for all the praise it gets for being the king of the deck, Achpu people have a real tough time.
Absolutely. And so do 13s.
Right.
It's kind of, I always look at it like if you had, an oscilloscope or a graph or something like that, and you said, up is positive, down is negative. Okay, we're just going to put them like that. Challenging experiences, great experiences, divine experiences, right? So you might have the ones, and they're kind of like they're a little bit just going along the baseline. They're not going too much in one direction, too much in the other direction. 6, 7, and 8, they're these kind of like this nice sine wave that goes along the oscilloscope. A little bit of good, a little bit of bad, and this sort of thing. Well, the 13s, they're kind of like crashing uncontrollably between the highest of highs and the lowest of lows. And so this is the most challenging journey because they really get to touch the divine, but they can also be plunged in some extremely challenging situations. And I see Achpu like that. I mean, Achpu is the quest for the divine, but you don't go on the quest for the divine without having to go and slay the dragon. And they are really put to the test when they're on that challenge, when they're on that path.
Yeah, I heard that Achpu was to enter into darkness. And I've been that rings true in my mind whenever I think about Achpu, and I'm watching Achpu people, and I see them. Sometimes, it's interesting. Some people are hard to figure out, and some people you can figure them out in about 2 seconds. And I know a few Achpu people that, like, for example, my grandma was Achpu, and I knew her really, really well, and her life was just a big tragedy. Have you ever read Angela's Ashes?
No.
Oh, it's a sad Irish book about like a really terribly sad Irish family. Anyways, that's my grandma, and but she was the best person ever. She was an amazing person, but her life was just one tragedy after another, after another, after another, and the thing that came out of it was this person. So for me, when I see the novel Aku, I'm reminded of my grandmother, and I think to enter the darkness, you know. And some of the Aku people I know, like I know one person who's a total dick. He's a cool guy, but he's a dick, you know. He's grouchy, and like Steve Jobs. There's a classic
9
example. Like Steve, was he 9 or 8?
He was 9.
Okay, well you would know because you got the charts. But anyway, he was Aku, and so he's infamously a dick, right? He's also he is. He's all his coworkers, and you know, it's well known. It's probably, you know, but it's like he's also a brilliant person, and he's really changed the world, really. But you know, he's famously a dick, and so when I see Aku, of course, it's the king of the deck or the ace of spades or whatever. But it makes me scratch my chin a lot and go, well, it's not that simple. It's complicated. It's the king, maybe if it slays the dragon, like you said, or you know, if it's able to make it through, then it gets the thing. But otherwise, how can I say? Yeah. It's not all sunshine and roses, or something like that. Yeah, it's quite interesting.
Maybe we should wrap up, Paul.
I think it's a perfect thing.
Have you got another question?
Well, yeah, but maybe it's another time because I can see we can really expand on a lot of stuff, and I think there's a lot of stuff to think about already with what we've covered. That's one.
Okay.
So, yeah.
Okay.
I would agree. So this is a great place to.
So I just want to kind of like also sort of put it out there. The next couple of days I'm going to be filming a video about the movement of Venus, which has been going on through this year and why it's been throwing up so many challenges for so many people, why we've been really looking at our shadow self since, in particular, February of this year, and it's all to do with the movement of Venus and the appearance of the Year Lord. So I'm going to go into detail in that, so hopefully that'll be up on my site in the next 3 or 4 days or so.
That's a good...
I am so excited about this one because I found a cycle within the calendar that I've never seen in a book, but it fits exactly, and it's a cycle that happens every 8 years between Venus and the Year Lord. So I'm so excited to get it out there, but it's taken me probably 6 weeks to formulate it to get it into the stage where I can actually talk about it.
Well, I will not talk about it here, but I obviously would love to. But that was actually originally going to be what I wanted to talk to you about. Today, because the last time I talked to you, you had mentioned some crazy things about planets, and you were really watching closely. And I thought, maybe you have some very interesting things to say about that subject, which is really a totally unexplored realm for me. So I'm really fascinated to talk to anybody who's dabbled in it and has some information I can learn something from. So we'll have to save it for next time. But the whole planets and how it messes with the Zolki. It's a very fascinating subject.
Yeah, so next, like I say, within the next 4 or 5 days, you should see that video appearing, and kind of like not just about what we've all been going through this year, the way that we've been having to force to look at ourselves, but when it's going to finish as well, because that's coming up in not too long. So kind of we get a little bit of a respite from the forces which have been at work this year in about not too long anyway.
You critic bastard. All right, we'll leave it at that. Jaguar, thank you very, very much for taking the time to talk to us. It was amazing, and I definitely look forward to the chance that we get a chance to talk in the future.
Yeah, awesome.
Thank you. Yeah, great to meet you again, Paul. Great to meet you, Eagle. And until next time, huh?
All right, cheers, man. Take care.
Have a good night. Have a good evening. See you soon. Bye.
Bye-bye.
Wow, that was a great interview. Special thanks to Marc and Eagle. And I just want to say thank you to our sponsor, the Zolkeen Explorer app, which you can download at the Play Store and on the Apple App Store. All right, peace and love, everybody. Keep on living the Zolkeen.